light within my heart, light within my thoughts, light within my words. May one and all and everything, blessed and loved, ever be. Welcome. I am Sister Who. Through these shows, I kind of let my mind run whichever direction it wants to. It's basically been running in high gear since very early childhood, possibly even before I was born. I guess at whatever point something in the universe or God decided that I was going to be autistic, I think that's when somebody turned the switch on for my mental processing and put it in high gear, and it's been running there ever since. And so people sometimes get frustrated with me when they want me to take some time and think about it, and I say, well, actually I already have. And it's not to say that I'm a know-it-all, it's not to say that I've thought every thought that there could be. I haven't. But there are so many things that I have thought about extensively and deeply, and a lot of that feeds into what comes out in the show. Because my brain has always been so hyperactive, I guess you could say. In trying to come to terms with, and a lot of my shows come back to this theme, I guess, as an autistic living in a neurotypical world, which neurotypical is basically the word for everybody who's not autistic, because the way I understand autism is that it is an atypical, unique form or kind of brain wiring. And so the neurotypical, neurologically typical brain is what 98% of the world's population have. The current estimate, in any case, is that about 2% or less of humanity are autistic. Some people have suggested autism might be the next phase of human evolution, so that statistic might be going up in the future. But at the time of this recording, the statistic I find most frequently is that autistic people are about 2% of the population. And living in a world of predominantly neurotypical people means that virtually every day is a struggle for me, because I have to keep, my brain requires precise definition and precise sequence and being very specific, and vague generalities confuse and overwhelm me because I don't know what people are wanting or asking or talking about, and if it all comes rushing at me at once, it's overwhelming. And frequently, I mean, it's like when somebody says, "How are you?" and I can think of 15 different possible responses in the first half second. And I don't really know what they're asking, and half the time all they really want to know, or all they really want to say, is good morning, and they're not actually wanting me to answer the question. But of course I try to answer it, because autistics frequently take language more literally. So in a sense, it's like every day of life for me is a struggle and a battle against overwhelming odds. And it was so marvelous to me when the movie Joyeux Noël was finally made, documenting and presenting for people to begin to understand the unofficial Armistice, I think it was called. It was basically an unofficial ceasefire that occurred on Christmas Eve during World War I, where if the movie story is more or less accurate, which I'm told it is, the German troops had Christmas trees delivered to the trenches, so they had all these little trees with candles on them, because the people back home wanted them to be able to celebrate Christmas, and they wanted their troops to know that they were loved and remembered, and we want you to be able to celebrate Christmas too. So they have Christmas trees, and then they're singing Christmas carols in German, and one of which, of course, was Silent Night, which is perhaps the most international of all Christmas songs. And when it was heard by someone in the Allied trenches, as depicted in the movie, it was a Scottish minister who had bagpipes, and he began playing the melody. When he heard them singing it, he began playing Silent Night on the bagpipes. and which led to one of the German soldiers coming up out of the trenches and singing Silent Night in German to the Allied troops playing it on the bagpipes. And as the two were coming together, the music and him being up there, and then everyone kind of joining in, and them all coming out, remembering that it was Christmas Eve, and laying their guns down and coming across no man's land and embracing and remembering that it was Christmas Eve, and having this, and over the next day or two, interacting and talking, sharing food, sharing conversation, sharing letters, playing games together, because at that time the Catholic Mass was said in Latin. Catholics on both sides would know how to participate, and so the priest led them in a Latin Catholic Mass where they were all worshiping together. And it was this unofficial ceasefire where they essentially all became friends and then didn't want to kill each other, because then afterwards they were essentially protecting each other, and so they'd be running back and forth with a flag of truce, carrying messages that our infantry is about to shell your trenches with, so if you want to be safe, you need to come hide in our trenches. So they all went over to one trench. Well, now they're going to retaliate, so they all went back to the other trench. And they all survived because they were helping each other and loving each other. But of course, it raised havoc with their commanders, who wanted them to kill each other. And in all of that, it's the nonsense, I guess, of being of war itself. There's this war going on. We're in a world that is so inhospitable and so hostile, and we're a veteran of an unseen war and need that kind of healing. We need that armistice. We need that Christmas Day where there's no enemies. We're just all friends, and then we're taking care of each other. And then if it was up to us, the war would stop and there would be no more war. The only way that World War I was able to continue is that they had to take all those troops and disperse them all over, so that there was no solidarity in wanting peace anymore within the troops, because they couldn't fight for war while wanting peace. But all of the soldiers that experienced that day of peace between the trenches knew that they wanted peace and not warfare. And the thing I found I got a recording of that movie, and in the explanations after that are also included on the disc of the recording, they were talking with one of the directors or producers or somebody, but there was some report that he got a letter as they were preparing to do the movie from a woman who described herself as the daughter of the Armistice, because the only way her parents met was because of the Armistice, because her father was German, her mother was French, and because the father went to visit the French soldier that he had met on the day of the Armistice, he met that soldier's sister and married her. And the father would not have met the mother except for the fact that they formed a friendship during the ceasefire. And then those were her parents. She was born, and she said, if it wasn't for that ceasefire on Christmas Day during World War I would not exist. And that totally amazing and theoretically impossible sort of scenario. All these different details that have to fit together for something like that to happen. And all the way, what if they had lost touch? What if one of them had died? What if they had moved and couldn't find each other? But they did find each other after the war. They met in Paris, and history was made. And I find things like that exciting. I find the triumph of love exciting. I find the ways that poverty is reduced exciting. I find the ways that understanding and humanity remembering that it is one big extended family, and that it's time to stop fighting each other, and all of that, that's the future that I want to support, and that's why I keep doing these shows. And hoping that, and wishing that somehow that it would catch on, and it would be wonderful if we get to the point where this work is actually financially self-supporting, but for the moment I'm doing everything I can with whatever tiny resource comes within reach. And trying not to be discouraged by how limited my resources are sometimes, and how much I wish there were more people who'd support me doing the show, and getting to the point where even if I can't find a camera operator, we're still going to do these shows because there are still people who want them. And in the midst of all that, I have a friend now who is, as quickly as he's able, but it is a very laborious process because I don't have the technology that the big companies have to create subtitles in foreign languages. And so this friend, and he very much has become a friend, he and his wife who live in Mexico, who are doing the Spanish language translations. But to do that, first I have to make the show, then I have to make a transcript of what I actually said in these shows, because they're all completely unscripted. So we make the show, then we have to make a transcript of what actually did I say, then I have to send that to him, and he has to translate it into Spanish. Then, because I don't have the computer expertise to just do Spanish subtitles, I have to match the words to what I'm saying on the screen and literally re-edit the entire show, putting the words on the screen at the same time as they correspond to the English that I'm speaking. And so so first there's 3 hours of face paint to get ready for making the show, then there's a half hour of recording the show, then there's probably 2 to 3 hours of editing the show to completion and uploading it. Well, and then there's another 4 hours or so to upload it to the internet, then to get the transcript of the show, and then to edit that, because the transcript comes with no punctuation, so then I have to edit it into a coherent transcript with punctuation. Then I send it to my friend in Mexico, and he has to translate the whole thing into Spanish, which, sometimes it's as much as 5 to 10 pages of transcript. So it's a lot of translating to do. Then he has to send it back to me, and then I spend 3 or 4 days pasting all these Spanish words onto the screen, reprocessing the video and re-uploading it. So for each half-hour episode that has Spanish subtitles, you're probably looking at somewhere, just making a wild guess because I didn't add all that up in my head, I think that must put it somewhere between 20 and 30 hours of editing for each half-hour episode with Spanish subtitles, but that's just a guess. It's a lot of work to do this, and I do not for 1 minute imagine that it's not worth it when I get messages from people who have seen the show and find encouragement and inspiration in the show. And that hopefully someday we will get to the point where it will be a 3-camera shoot in a studio again, like the first 55 shows that I recorded way back in 1992. And wow, I remember it like it was yesterday, but that's the way the autistic memory works sometimes. With all of that, to say thank you for giving me the opportunity to do this and to be here. And if I had been born any other time, none of this would happen. But thankfully I live in an age and in a country where sisterhood is okay and is tolerated enough to create this show. But it is a public access show, and I tried offering it to public broadcasting. See, in terms of television, you have public access, and then you have public broadcasting, and then you have commercial television, and there are probably other levels in between there too. Public access, public broadcasting, cable television, commercial television. YouTube is actually kind of sort of a public access level because there's no censorship. You make whatever you want to put and you put it out there. I offered my television show to to a public broadcasting station once trying to get a wider audience, and they gave me the funniest rejection I've ever received. They looked at it, and it was so thought-provoking and so unique, and theatrically it was one show, but in terms of content, in terms of audio it was one show, in terms of video it was another show, because I do so much with symbol and metaphor, and yet what I say is common sense discussion of issues of life and spirituality. And because it was two such completely different shows, and there's literally nothing like this on television, to the best of my knowledge, on any level of television. And so because of that, the public broadcasting station that I approached looked at it and scratched their head and looked at me and said, "We don't know what to put it between." And I thought that was the funniest rejection I've ever heard. And I said, "Well, I can do a pre-show and a post-show if you tell me what you want." And no, that wasn't what they meant. It was so unlike any other television show that they really didn't know how, what show are you going to put after this and what show are you going to put before this? Because usually shows will evolve kind of from one thing to another, or it'll be a news show and then it'll be a sitcom and then it'll be a movie. And where does Sister Who Presents fit? And the best they could say is, we have no idea. It was just totally baffling to them how you would put Sister Who Presents into a television lineup of where to put the show. And so the show was never put on public broadcasting television. I don't know if it will ever be on commercial television, because I think they would complain about the freedom with which I mention anything and everything. And if commercial television depends upon ratings, I can't be concerned about ratings, or I wouldn't be able to say what I say. And I can't be concerned about ratings. I need to be concerned about people, because I'm not trying to make profits. I'm trying to help people grow. The problem with helping people grow is that one never knows how long it might take, who will see it at what point, and what if this show is being watched 20 years from now by another generation that may not even be born at the time that I'm recording this. There was one time I was at a public event, and a young woman walked up to me who looked to be about 17, and she said, "I've been watching you on television all of my life." And I said, considering how long the show has been in production, I can see how that would be true. And it was a very high compliment to be part of her growing up to that extent. And I just said, well, most of all, I hope it's been helpful to you. I hope it wasn't, I really want this to be a good thing for everyone. Even if you disagree with everything I say and everything about my perspective, and if you're an atheist who disagrees with me conceiving of the divine as some sense of person, but personhood beyond human definitions of personhood, maybe an atheist doesn't need the divine to be a person. Maybe an atheist thinks of the divine as the perfect order in the universe. I don't really have any way of saying what it should or shouldn't be. My point to people is that there is a non-physical part of yourself, and there is a synchronicity or coincidence in the unfolding of the universe, however you want to look at it. And there is an ability of some description to have a positive relationship with all of it, no matter what description you pick. No matter what description you pick, it is possible, I believe, very adamantly, to have a good relationship with whatever is around you. Cynicism and discouragement and despair are not required. There is too much positive potential to settle for that. And there is even more positive potential if we quit judging each other and work together and accept that you need this belief, I need a different belief, that person needs still a different belief. We need the freedom to be individuals and to be relational in our differences, not in spite of our differences, but in our differences. that in looking at the way that a person of a particular faith views this relationship with the transcendent, that there is something about that could be potentially be empowering to my life also. There is something about noting the passages of life, the births and the coming of age and the marriage and the loss of a loved one and the beginning and ending life in this, well, I guess it's not though. I was going to say beginning and ending life in this solitary fashion, but it is and it isn't, because beginning life, you may have been part of twins or triplets or quadruplets or quintuplets or any number, or you might have been born into a very busy family, or you might have no memory of that and have been given up for adoption and come into the world as an orphan who needs to be adopted in some formal, governmentally controlled sense. And in the end, do we go out all by ourselves, or do we go out with a family standing around the bed reminding us that we're loved? And it varies from one person to the next. I don't know. We'll have to see how it all plays out, I guess. And, well, and for some reason I was just reminded of something that my friend Jean said to me once. Jean, having been blind since birth, commented that the thing you have to remember about the minority of people with disabilities is that everyone's a candidate. You may not have a disability for the first 9/10 of your life, but you may have one as you are leaving this world at the end of your physical life. So I guess that's where whatever house I ever have from this point on in my life, I will always insist that my house be completely accessible. I want there to be a ramp to the door, no steps. And I want it to be all on one level, so that if my ability changes, or if I develop a meaningful friendship with someone whose abilities are limited in some physical way, that I can invite them to Christmas dinner and say, I'm including you because I love you, I care about you, you're part of my extended family, I want you there, you matter to me. I don't want a house where you can't come because it's got steps. That kind of integrating myself into the human family, and I guess that we're at the moment I'm struggling to get through a doctoral program, and maybe at some point in time in the future people will be watching this and say, yes, and you did, and you finished it in this year or whatever. And we know what happened since then. But the point in mentioning that to me is that academia itself is wrestling with growing pains, and how do we accommodate original research, and how do we maintain accountability and maintain academic standards, and yet without basically infantilizing the human race. Keeping the human race an infant by insisting that in order to become someone with a PhD, you have to cite other people with PhDs, and that's where I've often complained that I'm not allowed to say anything that hasn't already been said. And academia is trying to find ways to deal with that don't keep humanity dumb and stupid and uneducated and ignorant, that still maintain a certain intellectual rigor to what is necessary, so that we don't wind up making academic accomplishment meaningless. But there needs to be a balance between making academic accomplishment meaningless. We don't want that, but we also don't want academic accomplishment that is an absolute straitjacket and cannot grow. I've said so many different things within the show today. Thank you very much for watching. I hope that you found something in this last half hour that's been helpful to you. And in whatever you found, what is most important to me is that your individuality and your spiritual freedom be preserved. That whatever you find empowering and growth-producing and insightful, that is what I hope to support and nurture, and to whatever way I can do to be a servant to that. Because it is really very much about being a servant, not about being the guru or the master or the expert. I don't know that I have the wisdom to do that. I have only everything that I can give that I hope is useful to you. And I don't know that I'm superior or inferior to everybody. I think we're all really on the same level. And as the brilliant songwriter Pat Humphreys put to music, we're all swimming to the other side. Some in power and some in pain. We're all swimming to the other side. It's one of the most powerful songs I think I've ever stumbled upon. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, and may you be abundantly blessed in the pursuit of your own dreams and in all your dealings with the diversity of humanity around you, now and always. May one and all and everything blessed and loved ever be. Amen.